When they created a federal gas tax and states created gas taxes, they created this monster that kind of exists to this day that keeps wanting to build roads. We're fighting a symptom rather than getting at a funding structure that produces that monster, and trying to stop a freeway widening as opposed to changing the conversation.
Demosissification might have to be almost a branding exercise.
American car culture destroyed the streetcars in LA just like they destroyed the streetcars in the Twin Cities. I always feel like you're one good mayor away from like bicycle and pedestrian nirvana.
That's why I love like Anne Hidalgo and the mayor of Barcelona. They're just like, I don't give a crap. We're doing this.
When you build it and people are using it, that gets seen, and politicians start to realize like, oh, these are voters, you know.
All right, welcome to Bike Talk on the KPFK live stream. Currently operating out of Zoom because of COVID, but we may be back soon, right? Because they're lifting the restrictions. Have you heard anything, Nick, from the KPFK studio?
Not I.
No? Okay. So we may be able to get back in there in the next couple of months, I guess. Today, we have a really great guest, a favorite cartoonist of mine named Andy Singer. He's going to be coming on at 6:15. But first, we're going to bring on Sophie Maerowitz, who's going to talk to us about things in New York, specifically the Lower East Side and Avenue C, a protected bike lane that is stirring up controversy. Welcome to the show, Sophie.
Thanks so much for having me. Yeah, great to meet you guys. My dad texted me right before this, like, hey, you know, LA is the center of car culture. And I was like, yeah, I think the guys on the show know that too. Anyway, yeah, I live on the Loisaida or Lower East Side, East Village, Alphabet City. In December of last year, the Department of Transportation ended up presenting a bike lane plan for Avenue C. And we were pretty happy with that because we actually got an open street on Avenue B as part of the pandemic era open streets program, which is like a whole other animal, which is my life right now. We've got all of this kind of energy behind a bike lane on Avenue B, just a block west. And Avenue C seems like it's going to be in the bag, right? I mean, we have this big project that's shutting down a huge commuter conduit, and you know, there's just clear community support for it, like very little friction at community board. And then I was on a local blog posting about a neighborhood event. And in the comments section, there was just a business owner from Avenue C saying, oh, they're going to add another protected bike lane. We got to rally together and have like all the businesses come to the park and present a letter against the protected bike lane to the community board. So they're presenting at community board next week. The DOT is coming back with what they call their community feedback from restaurants and residents on Avenue C. It's about parking. It is always about parking. But what we have in terms of conditions on Avenue C right now is a bunch of dilapidated paint, previously sort of painted lane bike lanes that are, of course, parked in the whole way. We do have to route around a few bus stops, which means that the design includes sharrows and kind of really spaced out bollards that are not super ideal, which is what part of why we advocated for Avenue B in the first place, because there wasn't a bus lane to contend with. But the protected bike lane that the Department of Transportation presented last year was still a huge step up from what was on Avenue C. You know, I'm hopeful that because we're dealing with, you know, the climate crisis and completely changing the coastline, that we're gonna win. We're gonna just keep moving forward with Avenue C. But being in a fiscal crisis, you know, I worry that the Department of Transportation will take any excuse it can to leave protected bike lanes out of its budget. I think we have support. I think we'll be okay. But, you know, always just good to kind of be on the defense for that kind of stuff.
Okay. Sounds a lot like the kind of block by block battles that we have here in Los Angeles. And we have a neighborhood council system that's also sounds like what you guys have, where it's like an advisory board, but it does get taken seriously.
Right.
So, yeah. So thanks for the report. And
Sure thing.
yeah, we're wishing you luck. I mean, we're kind of going through this thing right now with bus rapid transit, and there's bike lanes mixed in, and LA is sort of struggling right now with I'm sure all the same kind of things that you guys struggle, from what I read in Streets blog mostly. But
yeah, shout out to Gersh and Juliana and all the awesome writers there.
Right on. All right, let's bring on Joe, Linton, and Felicia to talk about the Eagle Rock situation.
So
hey, Felicia.
Hopefully everyone's recovering from that 4.5-hour long marathon meeting last night.
Felicia, introduce yourself though, and what the group that you helped start. Maybe.
Okay, so I first got involved with this when I first heard of BRT coming to Eagle Rock, and then I heard there was opposition to that from just a few people. So I started Equitable Eagle Rock. So we started advocating to make sure that BRT stays in Eagle Rock and doesn't get bypassed and go onto the freeway. And then we've developed that into this larger community group of Eagle Rock Forward, and we now have this beautiful Boulevard proposal that we've presented to Metro and to the community.
And what's in the beautiful Boulevard?
And so that one's something that it has something for everyone, for the community, for the businesses, for the environment. So that's like native landscaping, bus lane, parking protected bike lanes, wider sidewalks, raised bike lanes so that families feel safe biking there.
I like one of the critics described it last night as dining, parking, walking, bikes, and a big fat bus. She didn't like that, but at least some advocates on Twitter
it's a selling
that up as like, hey, let's do it.
Yeah, so we're facing some opposition. Last night was a marathon meeting. I think it was a problem that Metro didn't have a time limit on comments. So one guy, he spoke for 8 minutes. So there was just a ton of like misinformation and rants running rampant last night.
And there
would you say that there's more or less, like how is the split on support and against from last night?
I actually wrote that down. I don't know, Felicia, do you want to answer that, or do you want me to?
I don't remember the tally, actually.
There were 51 comments. There were 26 in favor, so it's just a tad more, and there were like 41 against. So, and there were a handful of kind of neutral people who had questions about Burbank and Glendale, about the uncontroversial parts of the project. So definitely the supporters, the folks urging Metro to go further than what it's doing, were just barely a majority. We're just over half, and the opponents were, just over 40%.
And I heard that there were like a lot of people who had raised their hand at the beginning of the meeting, but the meeting lasted, way past the time that they thought, so they just couldn't stay on for that 4-hour thing.
Yeah.
So it wasn't really.
I think I got to hear a total of probably over 500 of people saying, project critics, but then also advocates kind of copying the project critics, saying, I've lived in Eagle Rock for 47 years, and I've lived in Eagle Rock for 3 decades, and I've lived in Eagle Rock for, 26 years, whatever. It's like, it gets the sort of NIMBY script of, I'm the legitimate person. I mean, one of the business owners said, I'm a person who matters, as if bus riders, people on foot don't matter.
That's the difficult part of this whole conversation, right? It's like every neighborhood seems to get veto power over these regional mass transit systems that Metro is trying to implement. And it's like, how do you get past that? How do you, does Metro have enough political ability to get past the local? how much right do the locals have to what's going through their neighborhood?
Let me tee up Felicia for bragging. I mean, I think what Eagle Rock Forward and the beautiful Boulevard plan, I mean, they've got businesses, they've got schools, PTAs, lots of residents, they came up with a great plan, and they got broad support in the neighborhood, and they're winning. So
awesome.
That's how you do it, Don. But Felicia, what take some kudos on that and tell us how you did it.
Yeah, everyone's Natalie Friedberg, we have to give a shout out to her. She's been really great at speaking with businesses and getting them to understand how that would be beneficial for bringing in more customers, making it a more lively place, and also how it would help their employees instead of them having to search for parking or for them being like late to work because of the bus, that it would help them too. So yeah, we have a ton of broad support, but even with that broad support, it was so problematic to hear the people saying like, I'm the real stakeholder, when we know that the bus riders are at the bus stop right now, and they're like mostly Spanish or Tagalog speakers, and they're definitely not being heard. So that's the hard part still.
I think, Don, the way you, I'm sorry, go ahead, Felicia.
Oh yeah, it's just like their needs are being ignored when some people, I don't want to characterize all people living on Hill Drive, but some think only their opinion matters.
Let me ask you, I've actually been following this argument on the Eagle Rock neighborhood group, and there's a lady who, it's like, you've got these streets that always come up as side street cut-through streets that people are worried about when these get implemented. The same thing happened with Venice Boulevard. So the way that I see it, it's like there's a political opportunity there. You have this side street that already is a cut-through side street. It doesn't really have to do with Colorado. It looks like it's more of a 134 to the 2 freeway cut bypass, right? And it's already a cut-through, and people are already annoyed at cars cutting through. Is there some kind of opportunity to, like, could Metro give them something and get their support? Like, hey, we'll protect your side street with more stop signs and compact traffic circles, or whatever they do in cities like West Hollywood or Culver City, where they really work hard to protect their residential streets. Is there an opportunity there where Metro can work with LADOT and protect Hill Street and Yosemite and get more political support from those groups, from those homeowner groups?
That makes sense, like in theory, but we also know like there's some people who, they've lived there
they just won't be deterred.
They're just hesitant to change, which is understandable. Yeah. So it sounds nice, but I don't know if that's really their point, that they really want.
But I think, Don, this is a bus project. Why are we centering homeowners who already live on quiet streets who aren't going to ride the bus? I mean, I think your question,
because the thing is
your question
the thing
is
that
a little
I've found,
you're centering, a privileged
now
class
I know what you,
over
I know,
folks the project is being designed for.
I know what you're saying, Joe, but it's like homeowners are unfortunately like seen by the political class as the stakeholders that matter. And
let's change that.
Oh, I mean,
let's organize.
You might as well change the United States of America.
Equitable Eagle Rock and Eagle Rock Forward did to bring those voices forward.
Yeah, we should point out that one of the most prominent homeowners and on Hill Drive is like Michael Nagara, who his son this week was charged with
setting fire.
Yeah, setting fire, and because he said he didn't like to see the homeless encampments.
Yeah.
So
I'm just saying that because the political reality is probably not going to change in our lifetime in the United States of America.
But Don, you're talking to people who are changing it.
All I'm saying is
don't say it's a reality.
I know. I don't want to be a pessimist, but I'm just saying like there are ways to get those people, at least some of them, on board. And I've done this with the Hyperion Bridge project. We went house to house and we got the signatures of the homeowners. We still didn't you know, we got a lot farther.
Thank Felicia for doing.
Yeah, no, I'm just suggesting, like, I see a lot of chatter coming from those people, and it's like, is there a way to get some of them on board? That's all I'm saying. Right now, we're going to bring on Andy Singer, who I know, Joe, you're a fan of, and you're an illustrator. I don't know, Felicia, you guys are both welcome to come on, stay on with us, including Sophie.
I'm going to listen. I've got Andy's cartoons book, and I've been following him since Car Free Times and the asphalt, the Alliance for a Paving Moratorium, all that stuff in the 80s and 90s, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I'm a big fan.
Awesome.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to sign off and listen.
Okay. And Felicia, we're going to talk to you again in the future about this situation. So let's bring on Andy Singer.
Hey. It's actually really interesting to hear you guys have the exact same discussion that we're having in, you know, Minneapolis and St. Paul, and like the exact same, you know, it's universal. There's a guy here, Mike Son, who once made a bike meeting bingo card where if somebody at a public meeting said, "Oh, bicyclists run stop signs," you went check. If someone at the meeting said, you know, bicycles don't pay taxes, you put check, you know, and then at some point in the meeting you could yell bingo if you got like 4 in a row. And it's like, it's interesting here. There are a lot of BRT projects that are in the works, and some of them really end up degrading the bicycle and pedestrian environment, either because they're putting them on what were rail trails, or because they put a station near where at a critical intersection or someplace and end up widening the intersection or making it more hazardous to cross or something like that. And you try to complain to them, but by the time they've actually put their plans out for public process or public review, everything's been decided, and it's really hard to get them to budge off their plan for whatever it is. So,
wow.
Now you wrote the book Why We Drive, you know, back in 2013, and my friend who was working at Microcosm at the time actually sent me the book. It cleared up so much about our situation in America. It's really a fantastic book, and it really gets into the nitty-gritty of like how this all happened. One of the things that was kind of a revelation to me was talking about the agencies that are there, and the people in the agencies that are there for their entire careers, which could be 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
And you've got these politicians that we vote in, and they're there for 4 years, and they have term limits and this and that.
Yeah.
So those agencies are not trying necessarily to listen to the politicians when they're on like a lifelong mission of their own. They've been educated, you know, I don't know, in the 60s and 70s when car culture was.
Yeah, I mean, DOTs here, the Minnesota Department of Transportation is proposing a project for a very divisive freeway that connects downtown Minneapolis and downtown St. Paul. And they've had tons of public feedback that, hey, you know, all the way up to we'd like to rip the freeway up. And it like many freeways in the United States, it partially destroyed an African-American neighborhood in the 1960s, late 50s and 60s. And you know, there are a lot of groups who would like to see it downsized or see caps or, you know, a freeway, a land bridge put over top of it or various other things. And the agency is still, they've released their what's called draft purpose and need statement, where they state what the goals of the project are. It's sort of part of the scoping phase of any road project. And it's the language of it is exactly the same as it would have been in 1950. It's like, we want to move cars. It's like traffic congestion and, you know, all the same kind of stuff. It's amazing. Yeah.
Give us a rundown of the main messages of the book for our audience who may not have read it yet.
The book was, I did like just a book of cartoons and sort of anecdotes and things about cars and car culture called Cartoons in like 2001 with there used to be a guy, Jan Lundberg, who died recently, but he was part of the Lundberg family, which does the Lundberg Oil Report, but he was kind of the black sheep of that family and hated cars. And he had this nonprofit that he started that was called the Alliance for a Paving Moratorium, and he tried to, in the I guess it would have been the early 90s to mid 90s, he tried to convince the major environmental organizations to sign on to a paving moratorium, the idea that we have enough roads and enough pavement in America and we shouldn't be adding any more to it. And none of them would sign on to it, Sierra Club or, NRDC or some of these big groups. And so, but he put out this newsletter that was called Auto Free Times. And I used to do stuff for that. And through that, out of that, a variety of ways came Car Busters. A guy named Randy Gent started that. And so I put out this book in 2001 of just cartoons and things that had been in Auto Free Times and Car Busters. And then people asked me to speak places. And so I started developing this slide talk during the 2000s. And then the Why We Drive is just kind of a book version of that slide talk. And it's just kind of giving people who don't have any kind of transportation background, explaining some of the issues with automobiles. Everybody knows that carbon comes out of their tailpipes and sort of the obvious things, but I don't think a lot of people realize how much they destroy space, physical space, the myriad of ways in which they're inefficient users of space. I think a lot of people online have seen the little meme of how much space 200 cars take up versus if they're all on bicycles or if they're all walking or if they're all on transit vehicles, and how much space that represents in your downtown to have to park all those vehicles and move all those vehicles. And then, what it does to our suburban landscape. And so anyway, my thing is just summarizing a lot of these different issues with cars in one place for people who don't know this stuff, and in a way kind of challenging the idea of green automobiles or green cars, because yes, you solve what comes out of the tailpipe, but you don't solve all the carbon that's going into creating the road infrastructure or the space destruction or like all the other problems that they create. And then I devote a little time to talking about the history of how we got here, which is a mix of a pure accident versus Europe, where in the United States, during the Depression, we were looking for ways to pump public money into transportation or into infrastructure projects. And all of the railroads and transit systems in the United States were privately owned. So it didn't make much sense to put public money into them. Whereas in Europe, after World War I, all of the streetcar systems and all of the public transit and intercity rail had been nationalized, because after World War I, everything was bombed and, the government had to bail everything out. So it was like German national railways, Swiss national railways, pretty much all the city systems were actually owned by the cities. And so when they had all this Marshall Plan money after World War II, they pumped it into these transit systems. It was a good conduit for public money. And so in Europe, the transit agencies predated their highway cousins. And so they could really compete with them for funding and stuff like that. Whereas in the United States, we kind of started out pumping all this money into highways that during the FDR administration in the 1930s. And the initial federal big agencies were highway agencies. And when they created a federal gas tax and states created gas taxes, they created this monster that kind of exists to this day, that just keeps wanting to build roads. It has this dedicated funding source. And when you have a dedicated funding source as an agency, it means that you control all the jobs associated with that, and you have a tremendous amount of political power. And like you were saying at the beginning, you control the politicians almost more than they control you. So to this day, we have the federal government has reformed this somewhat. In 1991, they passed the ICE-T, which was the Intermodal Surface Transportation Efficiency Act, and that allowed federal money to be used for transit projects, for bike ped, There was a congressman from Minnesota, from the state I live in, named Jim Oberstar, who drafted that legislation because he was the chair of the House Transportation Committee. And he put in what's called the enhancements program into that legislation in 1991 that was for bikes and pedestrians. And it was like 1% of the whole bill. But that gave birth to all the bike infrastructure that got put in the 90s nationwide. And it was the reason that a lot of cities and states hired bike ped coordinators and transit stuff. A lot of transit, both commuter rail and light rail was put in during the 90s as a consequence of that bill. So the federal government kind of reformed this a little bit, but states have not. California and Minnesota and most states still have a constitutional amendment in their state constitution that requires that certain tolling revenue and gas tax dollars be spent on highways. And so there's always lots of money for highways. And, if you're doing BART in the Bay Area or something, you have to come up with another way to raise money, and you're competing with other needs like housing and schools. And so we still have, so the book talks about that. And just kind of about the politics of transportation, the fact that if you live in a denser place in the United States, it's probably going to be progressive or more politically progressive. And the lower in density the place you live, the more likely it is to be Republican, and what the reasons for that are. And so, yeah.
Yeah, in California, we actually did just pass a gas tax, which I guess we hadn't raised the gas tax since the 90s or something like that. And I was always sort of on the fence about it because I think probably from your book, I kind of understood the dynamic of the money creating the monster. But we generally, the sort of bike advocates and pedestrian advocates, were in favor of the gas tax, if only just to make it more painful, I guess, for drivers to drive. But
that's the way it's sold sometimes to people, is like, if you increase the cost of driving, this happens with tolling too, and with what's called road pricing, which they're going to introduce in New York. But the devil is always in the details of these things, of where is the tolling revenue going to go? If the tolling revenue can be spent 100% flexibly by a body that's accountable to people and, can be used to subsidize transit or for bike ped or whatever, then that's great. But if it's only going back to roads, then, these things are a problem.
And then, there's a lot of discussion about where this money comes from. It's like Tax Foundation is a resource that I look at a lot of times to refer people to. When I hear the argument of like, well, bike riders don't pay for the roads. And then I'm like, well, actually car drivers only pay for about 50% of the roads.
That's right.
So,
yeah, that's right.
That was another sort of reasoning that I thought, okay, this is a good thing, the gas tax, but I guess it's sort of,
and in cities, it's even less, because pretty much like the city of Los Angeles or the city of St. Paul, all of the street infrastructure in the city pretty much is coming out of property taxes. Which
and all of the cities on the inner city.
You guys were having earlier about appeasing or not appeasing property owners, and why cities seem to listen to them much more than they do to non-property owners, because that's your tax base.
Yeah, and they, it's like, I hate that, but it's also kind of, I don't know when that's ever going to change about America, but, I'm always trying to find a way to pick off some of the opposition and try to get them to buy into a plan, because there might be some kind of self-serving interest for them. For example, these cut-through streets where these property owners are like, my street is going to get more busy with cars. And it's like, the funny part about all this is that people are always complaining about cars. And even the people that are opposed to these BRT projects, they're like, this is going to cause traffic. These cars are going to come down my road. And it's like, well, you're complaining about cars, and we're trying to introduce another form of transportation for people to choose. And it's just like, it doesn't click in people's heads.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard. I mean, I sort of side with your thing. I mean, I hear both of you guys, both Joe and yourself, in that discussion, in that, you know, I definitely want to try to get people on board as much as possible, even people that I disagree with. But at some point, you know, you need political brute force of showing enough people showing up at meetings or writing in or whatever. And that's, you know, sometimes that's the only way to get something done. But ideally, you know, you do something, and there is a lot of it is just human resistance to change. And like, if you change things, people are like, oh, you're changing things, you know. What are we going to do? And then once the change happens, or you do a couple of these things and you do them successfully, then there's less resistance, or less, at least with bike stuff. I don't know about BRT. It's hard to say.
Yeah. Like, so I've been wondering, are we going to have to fight for each street separately across the entire United States and wherever else is happening? I mean, are we not able to automate any of this?
You know, I mean, this is something that I wanted to get at a little bit in the book, which is that I feel as if a lot of times we're fighting a symptom of things rather than getting at a funding structure that produces that monster. And that if we were to reform the funding structure so that a DOT or whoever could equally easily get money for a transit project or a bike ped, or even building low-income housing closer to jobs so that people didn't have to use, you know, could walk to work. You know, those are the kind of things, you know, increasing flexibility in transportation spending and sort of reforming that whole funding structure, to me. Otherwise, I feel like we're fighting individual battles of trying to stop a freeway widening or trying to react to something, as opposed to, you know, like changing the conversation.
Yeah, Andy, I'm going to just pop in there. And I think, you know, treating the symptom is a really good point. For me, lately, I've kind of gone from fighting the power to kind of promoting what could be in my advocacy. So, you know, with the Open Streets projects that I lead a community open street and talk about, you know, fighting for, it's 8 blocks and it's taken up my entire life. But, you know, we're focusing really hard on programming right now. So we're doing like Zumba classes, exercise, performances. We had a fashion show, you know, and it's like, people are just used to being on the sidewalks. They like are, you know, are so trained to be in that zone. But when they see stuff happening and they see, you know, the benefits of reclaiming that space, that's when kind of some good stuff starts to get cooking, as opposed to kind of that friction you were talking about. Similarly with our busways, I worked on the 14th Street busway campaign, and it was the exact same thing. You know, you had this opposition group that was saying there's going to be traffic on side streets. You need to do an environmental study for a bus because there's going to be traffic on side streets. And then, you know, once we found out how fast the bus could be without cars in the way, the city was able to have this blueprint and they kept using it. So, you know, it's like kind of once maybe one of the policy or funding streams is like, give the city or municipality something to brag about, right? And then let them stamp it everywhere. Like the demosification sure. Might have to be almost a branding exercise.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you in 2 ways you improve the situation, because you do it and like the sky doesn't fall in. In fact, things get better. And then also because the agency had to do it or pull through it now, as you say, it has a template, you know, it learns some things from the process of doing it, of like, oh, how can we mitigate construction better? Or how can we sell this better at public meetings or do better presentations for things? And yeah, both of those things start to happen the more you do these projects. I'm a big fan of Jeanette Sadi Khan's book. What is it? Street Fight.
Street Fight. Yeah.
And just the idea of, you know, what can you do on the cheap, and that the more you do things and people see them, the more popular they become.
We were talking to, there are a few design firms that have come to check out the open street. We've been using we've repainted police barricades and started using them as sort of chicanes. And there's a group that wants to try prototyping a barricade made out of recycled bicycles. There are all kinds of like cool visioning things happening. But yeah, totally. I mean,
you sound way ahead of us. I'm trying to get them to use DOTs or public works departments have lots full of these jersey barriers, concrete jersey barriers, and I really like them because they provide actual physical protection.
Yeah. Oh no,
and
we love them.
And then New York, they decorate them, or like you'll get an arts group or somebody to like do funky stuff to them, and like
that's like 10% of the time. Most of the time, it's just like bollards that are just like a truck, and it's gone.
Yeah. Well, here we get plastic poles that get mowed down like the first.
Yeah, same thing.
Which I learned cost $100 a piece to be installed by the time you add installation and everything.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's a good question. Like jersey barriers, I mean, they're cement, right? So what's the like carbon footprint of pouring a bunch of jersey barriers versus the little plastic things that get destroyed?
It's a good question. I would say that, eventually you're going to rebuild the street one way or another. You have to reconstruct the street. And because the entire nation and every city has so much deferred maintenance and no money, and like the timeline for actually rebuilding the street is, oh yeah, we'll get to that in 50 years. I like the idea of they have all these jersey barriers sitting around doing nothing. I'd rather they plunk those or make some, there are a lot of temporary bikeways. I mean, her whole book is about, New York doing a whole bunch of things temporarily kind of on the cheap, but, with like, folding chairs and whatever. And I like that idea because it also gets at the idea that bike infrastructure has to be expensive. And it doesn't. I mean, you can just make space on existing roadways. It's a question of political will, not money.
Totally. You remind me of the Red Cup project in DC. I think that was really awesome. We have the Department of Transformation here, which has done like little flowers and cones. And, we were looking into it. So we got sawhorse barriers for these open streets, which are, supposed to be pedestrian, but they really, the way we have to configure them for emergency vehicles, they're still almost like a welcome mat for through traffic, but they do slow traffic down. And, sort of looking into when we thought we're going to repaint these sawhorses, they don't create like a hostile police presence in the middle. And this was last summer too, in the middle of, BLM's reinvigoration, we started repainting them. And I called, Steve Vaccaro, who's like a very well-known bike lawyer in the city. And I was like, hey man, like, what's the cost of these sawhorses? Like, if we paint over them, like, he's like, yeah, I think they're at most $70 each, and we've been painting them, repainting them, drilling them together, tying them together with paracord so that, people who really don't like it don't like throw the legs in the yard, but they're really cheap and they still manage to slow traffic down and create, this different vibe and create a new space.
It's like anarchist street design Legos.
Yeah, a little bit.
We have a group in Los Angeles called the Department of DIY, which does similar things, posters and painting and rearranging cones. It's pretty amazing how one little cone can cause drivers it's got a lot of power over drivers.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody about like some project, I don't remember where it was, but they painted big like colorful circles and intersections to confuse drivers.
I think it started in Portland. They had like it was called intersection repair.
Yes.
And there were a bunch of people who used to do, I don't know if they still do it, but they have an event in the summer called the Village Building Convergence in Portland. And they go into maybe 14 different intersections. The time I was there, which was in 2004 or something, 2005, they did 14 different intersections around the city, and they go in and put in native plantings, and they do one of these mandalas in the middle of the intersection. And they also had people who were into building with cob, which is like basically straw mud, but they put layers and layers of waterproofing over it. And so you can make like benches and things public, it's like concrete, but more benign. and you can make public benches and stuff with it. And so they would go in and do a bunch of these intersections, and they would have bands or, people, entertainment at each place, and they would put out a map like a newspaper of the 14 sites. And for the 2 weeks that the event was going on, you could bike between the different sites and like sort of hang out. It was sort of like a citywide street fair type thing. And I know some people came to the Twin Cities and did mandalas here. There's a couple around, but I don't know that we've done any in a while.
I learned recently about spray chalk. We had some at an event, like we were visualizing data on the street, and I figured that stuff would wash off, and it actually has stuck around. So kind of a modern.
I've never heard of it.
Yeah, no, news to me.
So we're seeing these things all over, the same things, the good things like Sophie you're talking about, the DIY things, along with the, having to fight these agencies. I'm just wondering, Andy, you came from New York City, grew up also in Berkeley, ended up in St. Paul. You've seen the three coasts. I mean, you've had a chance. I know that St. Paul is not on the coast, but it's on the
coast of the Mississippi.
But so you have a comparative view of places here. So, what's the same and what's different?
I think a lot of things are the same. I mean, I think American car culture is American car culture. They destroyed the streetcars in LA. Just like they destroyed the streetcars in the Twin Cities. National City Lines was involved in both things through their surrogates. The highway departments are kind of clones of each other. There's not a lot of difference between Caltrans and MnDOT. There are a lot of similar problems. I don't know. Like, I think there's more difference city to city. And I think cities, I always feel like you're one good mayor away from like bicycle and pedestrian nirvana. And, somebody will come in like Michael Bloomberg in New York, and like the transformation that happened in New York City over like a 12-year period or whatever. I saw it. I would go there to visit people. So I was dropping in maybe once every year or two for a while and biking around, and it's like, oh wow, here's this amazing bikeway, here's another one, here's another one, here's another one, and like and I've seen it here in the Twin Cities. I mean, when I got here in 2001, St. Paul was a little bit ahead of Minneapolis because it had a lot of nice park trails, but we didn't have very much on-street bike lanes or much stuff on streets or in the city itself, or the urban areas of the city. And Minneapolis, they got federal money. That they had a pilot project grant for over $28 million, I think, at one point in the mid 2000s. That Jim Oberstar helped them get, and they were one of the cities that was chosen for it. And then they had a mayor, R.T. Rybeck, who was very sympathetic to this stuff, and a public works department that was sympathetic to the stuff, or who did what Rybeck wanted to do. And so much got accomplished. I mean, it's amazing to see. It's amazing to see. And then Minneapolis is up there with Portland now in terms of mode share pre-pandemic.
Yeah, doesn't it have like several of the top bike-friendly cities? Minneapolis,
Minneapolis is, yeah. I think it's in the top. It's in the top 5 probably, or something like that.
But I hate to think that it relies on this one individual in a high position. I'd like to think
it's people voting for that individual or that, but it's a conglomeration of things. Obviously, you have to have an agency, a local public works department that's on board. You have to have a mayor's office that is on board, and enough like city council support, but mayors make a big difference, because in a lot of cities, they're the ones who appoint the public works directors. And they set the agenda in many cases. Some cities are a little different. Minneapolis is more city council driven. I don't know how LA is. But
LA is like, the city council has a lot of power, I think.
Yeah.
Or at least our current mayor sort of makes that excuse, I think. But the previous mayor Viragosa, actually, he kicked a lot of ass. He got the trains funded, and he definitely went against the grain and put in a lot of bike lanes. So
that's
the media
somebody
ended
bold.
up hating him.
Like, you need somebody who doesn't care about car owners complaining, or who doesn't care about how politically unpopular anti-car infrastructure is. So, I mean, that's why I love like Anne Hidalgo and, the mayor of Barcelona. They're just like, I don't give a crap. We're doing this. But they have that bottom up push too. They have like advocates that are doing the work. And they do have, I assume local, whatever the council member position is, who are running the torch. We have something called Streets Pack here. I don't know if you guys have that, but it's like they organize small donations to, transit minded council members and, kind of like lower down the ballot, and they endorse based on the history that politician has on, pedestrian, bike and bus and public transit projects. And, I remember talking to somebody who works with them, and they were like, it's about the small donations. Like, big donations are great and all, like, Bloomberg era or whatever, but like the small donations that show that political will exists among the people for those types of projects really like move the needle more than one might think.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's the element of getting people to organizing, getting people who care about this stuff to write in and speak up, and then use stuff, hopefully when it's built. Again, when you build it and people are using it, that gets seen, and politicians start to realize like, oh, these are voters,
What do you think about the media and the narrative that comes through the media a lot of times when it comes to car culture? It's like a lot of the advertising in the media is car.
Right.
It's car companies. They're spending like $14 billion a year educating us through the media here in the United States, right? Like,
yep. Yeah, it's huge. And then also, I mean, you look at especially legacy newspapers and stuff, they all have, there's always, I'm sure there's one in LA, there's always an annual car show. And that's always on the front page of whatever the paper, LA Times, or, here it's the Minneapolis Star Tribune and the Pioneer Press. And they devote some front page ink and there's a car section of the paper. And so, they're not going to necessarily give anti-car coverage or favorable stuff to bike ped. Although it's, it just depends on again, on the reporters and the publication. It also depends on the knowledge of the people involved, because newspaper reporting or journalism is a dying industry and doesn't pay very well. And like a lot of people who come into it might have an area of expertise in something in terms of city policy and government or whatever, but it's not necessarily transportation. I mean, that was another reason I tried to write this book. Was I used to go to, I drew cartoons for alternative weekly papers. So I think it still runs in like Random Links News in San Pedro, but occasionally. But all cities used to have these alt weekly papers, and they belonged to this consortium called the Association of Alternative News Weeklies that used to have an annual convention every year in a different member city. And they talk about at these conventions, or get speakers to talk about different issues that reporters cover, or that, and I felt like somebody needed to talk to these people about how they cover transportation. And the whole Streets blog movement has done a lot to move the needle, because it's given these folks more information, or and if you're organizing like a bicycle group or a walking group or whatever, being able to put out information to reporters or people that's kind of ready-made, or getting them to view you as a reliable source for information is also helpful for moving the needle.
Crash, not accident. That stuff's big. Mentioning there's a driver that did something and not a car that did something. We just passed a city council law to put DOT at the helm of crash investigations, so that the NYPD, the police department, doesn't talk to the media before, formal investigation is done, because so often, car crashes, the driver gets let off the hook, the NYPD gives a comment like, oh, they lost control of the vehicle,
Right.
why, it really prevents the public from knowing that there was any culpability, or that, there was a design issue on the streets.
Yeah, I mean, here locally, I don't know about in your guys' cities, but here I definitely have seen the media be more sympathetic to pedestrians getting hit in the last 15 years or so. And I'll see stories, done, even follow-up stories on like, so-and-so's rehab after traumatic brain injury from being hit by a car, some kid. And it is gotten like here, Ramsey County is doing more 4-to-3 conversions of big sort of 4-lane death roads. A friend, Bill Lindicky, calls them 4-lane death roads, where, one car stops for you, but then the next car comes and hits you. I mean, they're among the most dangerous sort of types of streets. So there is some movement in both the media and as a result, maybe, I don't know, but in county policy and like trying to deal with the carnage of people getting hit by cars.
Hey, a couple of things, Andy. One is, as a cartoonist, with what's the new model for news, whatever that is, where do you see your cartoon?
I don't know. Right now, I think I'm more concerned about journalism itself and like reporters. The journalism industry is just bottoming out on some level, at least the old legacy journalism industry. And I don't see anything coming to take its place in terms of online journalism that is able to make money or have like a really sustainable business model. And so you see a lot of blog sites and things that are always hitting you up for money. The Guardian, here we have MinPost, a local news site, which has some reporters who were laid off or left work at some of the other news sites, and they do good stuff. But I mean, basically everyone's reduced to being their own little NPR, hitting you up on like Kickstarter or Patreon or something, to fund their efforts. And I even see journalists who are like, I'd like to go to Afghanistan to report on something, and they're like hitting people up for money on their, Patreon site. Because they're not hired by a news institution anymore. And like those sort of legacy news organizations have cut, reporting staff and cut like the amount of people that they're sending to cover overseas conflicts. They're doing more stuff with freelancers. It's not, and so cartooning was sort of attached to the journalism industry. And as a result, it's kind of become disposable. And there are only a few, maybe under 20 or 25 newspapers in the United States left that have an actual political cartoonist anymore. There's it's called the American Association of Editorial Cartoonists. And it used to be like this big group with, tons of people. And now it's kind of a bitch session or gripe session when people come to it and they're like, oh, I have a job,
Maybe the book route, though, because when I read Why We Drive, I have definitely heard from other sources about how GM and the umbrella organization. What is it?
GM and Firestone.
They have this organization that ripped out all the public transit that was here and that worked. I mean, I've heard it, from a number of sources, but for some reason, when I'm going through Why We Drive, and there's like on each page, there's a short amount of writing and then like a picture, a graphic, it suddenly just sort of sunk in, in a way that it hadn't before. So it's a good medium.
I love it. I think the other thing about cartoons now is like anyone can make one. We have the meme culture, and memes are cartoons. It's like you're combining a photographic or some kind of image with a bunch of words. And like, a lot of the things that people just make and share on social media are brilliant. They're better than any political cartoon that's out there on a given issue. And so we've kind of democratized it to where anyone can do it, which is great, but it means that there's no more sort of job for professional meme makers or, but it is a good medium, right?
I think I talked to you maybe online at some point about your influences as a cartoonist. And, I would want to hear it from you here on the show. I'm going to assume that Mad Magazine was in there somewhere.
Oh yeah, I love Mad Magazine. I'm trying to think of God, I always forget the guy's name, but there was one dude who used to draw people with like these huge jaws and bulging eyes. That was
Don Martin.
Don Martin, that I was transfixed by as a kid for some reason, and then I loved Bernie Kleiben, who was most people know B. Kleiben from a book in the 70s called Cat, Hell of a Nice Animal Frequently Mistaken for a Meatloaf. And they made posters about it. There was like cat posters. Any panel cartoonist since the 70s is influenced by Bernie Kleiben, and that includes Gary Larson ripped off Bernie Kleiben's way of drawing scientists and animals and certain things. Dan Ferraro, who does Bizarro, borrowed, at least initially, and it's impossible not to borrow from Bernie Kleiben. And there are a bunch of his books that are still in print called Never Eat Anything Larger Than Your Head. That's pretty funny. Or Two Guys Fooling Around with the Moon is mostly, Tiny Footprints or Small Footprints or something like that. One of them is a book of just wordless cartoons. And he was like a magazine cartoonist in the 60s and 70s. So that's a big one. I always like Saul Steinberg, who used to do stuff for the New Yorker. He did the famous New Yorker's view of the world that was made into posters. So it would be like LA's view of the world, Salt Lake City's view of the world. And they would show like a couple of streets in whatever city it was. And then the rest of the world is like this kind of ambiguous. That was his best known image, but he made a ton of really great cartoons. And
that's been repeated so many times.
Yeah.
So are you coming with another book at some point, or what are your plans for the future?
Maybe, books are kind of dead. I mean, unless you're a former administration official doing a tell-all book at a moment of, or Prince Harry or something. And
I was going to say Andrew Cuomo, but
500,000 copies of your book. It's not a very lucrative thing. I mean, I bet a ton of authors that you read or see and you think, oh, this person must be making bank. It's like, nah, they have a teaching gig somewhere.
Or they go on those tours, like they're giving, $50,000 TED Talk,
right?
Talks for like a year,
right? Or some other sideline. I mean, you really have to sell like crazy amounts of books to. But I might put together, like self-publish or put out something again of like updated cartoons.
What about like a longer form, like a comic book?
I have an idea for a couple of things, and I have to, again, it's unlike regular book proposals where you can make a book proposal depending on who you are and maybe get a publisher for it. It's graphic novels. You kind of have to have worked out a lot of stuff before it's hard to get fronted money to do it. But I have a couple ideas. I don't know. At some point I'd like to get to them.
Well, right on, Andy. We're coming to the end of the show. So we want to thank you for coming on, man.
Thank you for having me on, and thank all of you for working to make your respective municipalities more amazing.
Oh my God, it's never ending. Seems like. So, anyways, thanks for coming on the show. And is there, we want to get all your social media hits, and I'm assuming you have a website. I haven't been to it, but
just andysinger.com, but it's a very Neolithic website. done in old HTML.
That's all good because the memes, the cartoons that you're putting out that I see on your Facebook feed. I mean, you go into more than just transportation. You're on whole like critique of American culture. It's really fun and amazing, and you find a way to get right into the just the way that you present the critique is fantastic. So I always look forward to seeing your posts.
Thank you.
So thanks for coming on the show. We really appreciate you, and hope to see a whole lot more work from you moving forward.
Sure. Thanks for having me. I gotta listen to the I still haven't listened to Charles on your show. I gotta listen to some past episodes.
Yeah, that was last week. That was great too.
Yeah. So anyway, thank you.
Okay. Take care, Andy.
Thank you, Sophie.
Sophie's practically our co-host now. Like so we might as well keep her on for a little bit more and talk and close out the show.
Not exactly going anywhere on my Friday nights these days.
No, but that was a great conversation. Thanks for chiming in because you had some great insights.
Oh no,
to
it's
share.
so cool! What
great.
A treat! I had no idea. So
right?
Cool. I mean, everybody's.
I was gonna show him like my original Mad magazine, but
I feel like I read one of the last ones before they stopped print, and it was like so sad. It was like it made me like really upset.
Yeah, I just read that Al Jaffe, who does the fold-ins on the back of the magazine, is 100 years old. He's still going. I was like, wow, because I don't know. Anyways,
hey, thanks for the guest.
It's just it was your idea. Thanks for coming on, Sophie, and
Andy was your idea.
And Andy Singer was my idea. Yes, he was. Somehow I creeped into his Facebook friend list. I just like requested him and he accepted me. So that was pretty cool. I've never met him before. So that was awesome. But yeah, it's like just talking to you, Sophie, about the issue that you're having in the Lower East Side. And, it's like Felicia and Joe coming on. We're talking about the same stuff that we've been talking about for years. It's just like, it's just an endless culture war, I guess. And at some point, I guess, things are changing. New York has been transforming, so that's good. So we want to keep following what you're doing. So hopefully we'll get you back on here with more reports coming out of New York.
Yeah, happy to talk to you guys about open streets. Got lots of good people like running up their own little mini DOTs in a way in their own neighborhoods, just trying to create a car-free or car-light environment as much as we can.
Yeah, here too. So we'll keep up the good fight. And Sophie, where can we find you on social media?
Madam West Bikes on Twitter is really where I do most of my rabble rousing. But the Loisaida Open Streets Community Coalition, Loisaida_OSCC on Instagram, Twitter. That's where you can kind of find out what hijinks we're up to get people to use the street and not drive through it.
Okay, awesome. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, guys.
And we'll see you back soon.
Thank you, Sophie.
That's amazing to actually talk to Andy Singer. That's cool. And we got to have Felicia on for a longer segment and get more info on this BRT situation in Eagle Rock, because this seems winnable. It looks like they're really making a lot of progress there. So I didn't mean to get into an argument with Joe about winning over the NIMBYs, because it's true. There's a certain point where you just can't win them over. But we'll see how this goes. It's kind of amazing that they
that.
Hey, Joe. Yeah, I'm not trying to. I know you're always saying that I'm being like an Eeyore and everything. It's like I'm not. I'm trying to win at least some of them over. At least some. Give them something to bring them over, because that gives cover to the. If they can at least get some of those NIMBYs on their side, it gives cover to the politicians to make tough choices, right? Don't you agree?
Yeah, but I think you gotta acknowledge people who are doing the work, who are right in front of you. I mean, Felicia
Absolutely.
did that. They got Hilda Solis on board. They got half the people, more than half the people at this community meeting to say they support this project. So it's like
Absolutely.
she did it. So
Well,
we can't.
we're
we
not
gotta celebrate that.
Well, I'm not one to celebrate until it gets past the goal line, is what I'm saying. It's like, okay, there's a lot of momentum going on. Can we get some more? Can we get some more people on board? I don't know, but it looks good. I mean, 26 out of the 50 for the more extreme plan, right? That's great. So do you think
for a mile worth of ripping out a lane of cars that the that the NIMBYs don't want? So the folks in Eagle Rock really stuck up for having a walkable, transit-oriented downtown. Anyways, sorry, I feel like I'm ranting on about it, but yeah, there's currently an EIR, and the Metro's supposed to approve it this summer for the whole 18 miles.
Mm-hmm.
And
so
then
Burbank isn't going to have a dedicated bus lane. Is that what you're saying? Like, or are they?
They're going to do like I haven't. The truth is, I haven't studied it super tightly, but they are in some places going to have some dedicated bus lane on the right side, so that left, right turning drivers can block buses and stuff like that. So whereas Eagle Rock's really pushing for center running BRT through the downtown area, which is just faster and less prone to get backed up behind a bunch of drivers.
Okay. Well, thanks for coming on, Joe. We appreciate it.
Have a good night. Sorry to jump in.
No. We like it when you come on, because you're very much, educated and up on all this stuff. So it's good to have you on. So we appreciate you, man.
Okay, well, have a good weekend. Good night.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye, Nick. Bye, Don.
We have an interview with
Oh, you're going to play the Lindsay Sturman? Okay.
Well, this interview is with John Stout. He did a report called Transformation, which identifies harmful health and environmental impacts caused by California's car-centric transportation system.
John Stout, thank you for coming to Bike Talk.
Of course, happy to be here.
And you are the U.S. PERG transportation advocate, and you just released an amazing report through CalPERG, yes?
Correct, you got it.
Okay, great. So I read, I don't want to say I read the whole report, but what I read was amazing.
Good.
And it sounds like you've sort of laid out the problem in 4 pieces and laid out the solution in 4 pieces. Do you want to tell us about it?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think you pretty much hit the nail on the head. Yeah, I think that our country's car-centric transportation system has been wreaking havoc on our health for a long time. And this comes kind of in, like you said, a couple major pieces. I think air pollution and noise pollution are one aspect that's really hurting a lot of folks. Climate change, I think, is another even broader one that stretches beyond our country. I think safety, traffic-related fatalities are at an all-time high, both for car users and also pedestrians and cyclists. And then just generally poor quality of life, I think, is kind of the last piece of the puzzle there, where a lot of folks who may even enjoy driving in a normal circumstance are often stuck in hours-long commutes and really suffer the consequences in terms of increased risk of diabetes and osteoporosis and all sorts of other terrible things.
Osteoporosis, I didn't know that was another. I have a friend who works in knee replacements in the healthcare industry, and she's like, it's all tied. I bet you it's 70% of our healthcare costs.
I would not be surprised. Yeah, no, it's really, I mean, it's so difficult to quantify something like, transportation's effect on our health, especially when it comes to air pollution, for example, where, the air has a lot of things in it and a lot of different pollutants are emitted. So it's really hard to pinpoint those on cars and trucks and such like that. But definitely, we have a pretty good idea that what we're doing currently is not working.
I saw in the report that 7 to 11% of dementia it was shocking.
Yeah, no, definitely. There was a lot of shocking facts for us too. I think, yeah, definitely finding that even just living close to major transportation centers, like a freeway, for example, is really bad for you. I think it wakes you up at night and can, cause all sorts of long-term problems, which is really unfortunate.
Tell us about the solutions.
Yeah, good question. So we have come up with a couple sort of midterm goals that we think are both visionary, but also realistic. So the first one, which I'm thinking you might be most interested in, is doubling the number of folks who travel by foot, bike, or transit over the next decade, so by 2030. And we're gonna do that by expanding transit networks and creating complete streets that are safer and more accessible and support folks who are on their feet or biking. The last two are electrifying all transit buses and also school buses by 2030. Again, the idea behind that is to clean up our air, especially for our kids. And then the last one is to also electrify all of the remaining cars on the road by 2035, which I know California is leading the way, as always. I'm actually a California native, although I'm currently based in Boston. I'm originally from Berkeley, so I definitely always feel good to know that California is out in front.
And so in terms of the bike stuff, I saw this one piece of it, and this has been something we've sort of been searching for. What is the scope of a bike network to really get people to bike? You had like one line about it that 1 mile of bike lane in 1 square mile of land equals a 1% increase in biking.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, definitely a report filled with good stats like that. I think in general, I mean, to make it more simple, I guess, is if you build the infrastructure, people will bike, I think is sort of the main takeaway. I think there was a recent article, actually even today, maybe in the New York Times, about how all these pop-up bike lanes that have been sprouting up across the world, I think most particularly in Paris, France is one of the big ones, where a lot of folks have been biking even more because the infrastructure is there for them to do so safely.
Yeah, I mean, it's frustrating because it's like, well, nobody bikes, so you can't build a bike lane, but like nobody's going to bike until it's safe. So you have to, you're just in an endless loop.
Exactly. Yeah. Same thing with all these, big public transit service cuts, right? I mean, folks are saying, well, we'll bring back the BART train, we'll bring back the bus system once the riders, come back. Well, they're not going to come back until you make the service reliable and, there for them. It's sort of, you got to induce the demand in that way.
Ah, that's great. Reverse the induced demand.
Exactly.
I actually stumbled on something this morning that I thought was really interesting, which is transit agencies have they serve multiple metrics and goals. And really the goal should be just to maximize it so that there's no traffic. Literally the number, how many people do you want riding metro or biking, is so that there's never too many cars on the street.
Exactly right. I mean, the more folks we can get onto a bicycle or onto a bus or subway, or even just walking, is going to take a car off the road. And I think that is really the name of the game. I think a lot of folks, at least in the circles that I run in, have been saying, electric cars are fantastic. They're really this huge boon. It's going to be a great new revolution. And that's all well and good. And we support electric vehicles. I mean, that's going to be a major key step to solving a lot of our climate crises and air pollution issues. But really, we need to get folks to drive less. We have this kind of little saying, drive less, live more. So I think getting folks out of their cars and into other modes of transport is going to be really the answer, especially in the short term or even the midterm for our transportation needs.
I mean, you guys did this amazing deep dive into all the health impacts. This is something else somebody said the other day, that our lifestyle may force many, many people into obesity and all the things that come from that. It may, obviously there are going to be people who can drive and go to the gym and have that time, have that whatever body, good genes. But have you ever stumbled onto anybody talking about how this might be the only way?
Yeah, I've never seen someone pinpoint it so closely to how folks move around day to day. That being said, I know there is a ton of data on even just this thing called active transit. So the idea, even that if you walk to the bus stop or to the subway stop, or, you walk to the bike share, even that alone every day a little bit is going to help prevent something like obesity from occurring. So I think that you're definitely onto something. I think in the average, or the day of an average American, I think encouraging any more movement that we can would be fantastic. And I think a great way to do that, sort of that's part of someone's day-to-day life once things return to normal, is getting to work. To and from work, I think, is something we all have to do. And I think that giving folks the tools to get themselves there on their own power would be fantastic.
Yeah. And tell us about your background.
Yeah, so I came to US Prague kind of by a roundabout way. I was actually working in educational and bike travel. I work for a company called Backroads. I'm not sure if y'all have heard of it. It's actually based in Berkeley, California, but they do sort of week-long biking and hiking touring trips. it's been fun to blend pieces of my travel background. And then I also studied environmental studies back at Pomona College in California, in Southern California. And it's been fun to blend those two together into the transportation advocacy world by, just kind of seeing where climate change and health and all these things meet together. I think it's a really fascinating space to be in.
Yeah. Don't you feel like it's like this is the tip of the spear. This is the people who are getting, the first over the wall and getting a little bloodied, but it's fun to be in a conversation that's like happening in real time.
Yeah. Especially too with all this infrastructure stuff. I mean, I'm sure you've been following it closely as well, but just seeing how the conversation really is shifting. I mean, I remember even when I graduated almost 10 years ago now, there was no real talk about, new bike lanes and electric vehicles and electric buses anywhere but the Bay Area in California, at least as far as I understood. And now it's, it's a national $1 trillion package that was introduced by the president. So it's pretty exciting.
I think Pete Buttigieg gets it.
I'm with you. I think he's on it. I think, I try to definitely, I root for him. Every time he says something, it's almost always something to root for.
Yeah. And I feel like the curse of bikes is that people write it off. They think it's like kind of for kids or they think it's like the Tour de France types, love them. A little bit different than the bike to work crowd. But I keep thinking and I saw this on Twitter, it's Occam's razor. The most obvious solution, the simplest solution is the solution.
I'm with you. I think also too with the introduction and expansion of e-bikes, I think that's actually a really big boon. I know when I was working at Backroads, this bike tour company I was with a few years ago, the clientele was on the older side, 50, 60, 70, my parents' age. And basically they all were huge cyclists, or at least they had one of the spouses was a huge cyclist. And in order to keep going and to keep getting on these trips, they needed e-bikes. And sure enough, that was the ticket for them. They would get on these trips through Italy or wherever they were, California, Napa, and be riding, and you just see the biggest smile on their faces as they're going up the hill or down the hill because they're on an e-bike, and it looks fantastic. And I think as the technology improves, the price will come down. And also I know that there's a lot of incentives that are coming up. I know California's got a couple going. So it's just great to see an incentivizing effort behind the adoption of e-bikes.
I also think it'll be transformational for families with small kids. I mean, I had to get my kids into car seats and cars for years, and it's
like a pain.
Yeah. And we actually moved to one of the few parts of LA where we could walk, because it's like driving. It's like, it kind of, it takes a toll.
Oh, it does. Yeah. I mean, I used to go to school down in Southern California, and it was really hard to get out of the car. I mean, there's just nowhere you can go where you don't have to get into a car. And I think I was fortunate enough to like I said, I was in San Diego before I just moved to Boston, and I was able to be a bike only, basically biking and trains. And everyone was shocked every time they spoke with me. How do you only have a bike in this city? So, well, it's, it takes a little bit of planning, but you can do it. But I think a lot of cities, it's not the case, right? I think LA is a good example where there's just usually not enough infrastructure there to protect folks who want to use a bike.
Yeah, no, I actually don't tell people to ride bikes in LA. I'm like, ride on a safe bike lane. But like, I mean, one of the reasons I'm a bike advocate is because I'm like, we need safe infrastructure to even have the option to do it. And then it's so awesome when you do it. I spent 3 days in Copenhagen, and I was like, oh my God, like
right.
We can do this totally differently.
100%. Yeah. And I think especially too, as a West Coaster moving to the East Coast, it's so interesting to see how the cities here are much smaller. They really feel much more European. Boston is kind of like a series of cattle paths that are crazy windy that have just been paved over. And actually it's much faster to be on a bike than it is to be on a car.
How's it going in Boston with bikes? Have they taken the red pill?
Yeah. So I mean, obviously I'm pretty new to the city, but from what I understand, the last 5 years have been really transformational. A lot of new big bike lanes downtown, a lot of good crosstown bike lanes. So I think it really enables folks to actually commute. I think the trick is going to be to connect some of these rail trails. There's these old train tracks that have been converted into bike paths. To connect those into the city, I think will be the big next step.
Wow.
I think that'd be cool. Definitely we have, I think it was nation leading traffic congestion here in Boston before the pandemic. So we'll see how that all shapes back up when things begin to reopen. But in the meantime, it would be great to build out the biking infrastructure a bit more even. Sort of the main takeaway that I'm hoping folks can get is, although, this pandemic has been really so devastating and terrible, in some way, I really do hope that we as a country can reassess our transportation habits and change the way we move around. I think getting folks out of their cars is going to be even more important than getting people into electric cars. And I think one of the main ways to do that is to get folks onto bicycles or onto a bus or onto a subway. And I think that will really, change our physical, hopefully mental and health landscape, if you will.
Mm-hmm. So what made you guys decide to write this report?
Yeah, great question. So our sister organization, Environment America, has looked or analyzed transportation through a more of the climate lens, but we decided here at USPIRG to look at it more from a people or consumer lens. And so that's really why, with all this new information coming out about all the negative health aspects of our current transportation system, we decided to take up this report. I should also give a shout out to Frontier Group, who also helped co-author this report. I definitely wouldn't be here without them today. They did a huge chunk of the legwork, and I just get lucky enough to take some of the credit.
Amazing. It's so great to talk to you. Thank you for coming on the show.
Likewise.
That's our show for tonight.
Transportation shows I care. Every turn of the pedal cleans the air. Greener than green, I'm saving the planet. Just like my friends Dale, Sean, Toby, and Janet. No greenhouse gas, a tiny carbon footprint up your ass. I'm on a motherfucking bike. I'm on a motherfucking bike.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Bike Talk. If you want to hear more, go to kpfk.org, navigate to programs, and choose Bike Talk. On the Bike Talk page, click on the archives link to play or download shows posted in the last 4 months. Go to biketalk.com and copy or click on the RSS link to subscribe. Our Twitter handle is BikeTalkPFK. On Facebook, we are Bike Talk. You can become friends and join our group.